Good morning, good day, good evening, everybody. My name is Simon Morrison, and I'm very pleased to be one of the hosts of this event. And my duty here is to thank the people sponsoring it, the program in Russian, East European, Eurasian Studies, and the music department were involved in organizing this event. I want to thank Carol Dopp for her administrative acumen, and I want to just pass the baton over to my colleague Yekaterina Pravilova, who will introduce our very special speakers today.
Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to introduce two speakers, Zhanna Nemtsova. He's a politician, a public figure, and a journalist, and she's the daughter of Boris Nemtsov. For several years, Zhanna has worked as a journalist at a Russian business channel RBK, and then following that in Deutsche Welle in Bonn. In 2015, after the death of her murder of her father, she created a public organization Nemtsov Fund dedicated to the memory of her father. The organization, the fund that runs several educational initiatives. Zhanna is also a writer. In 2016, she published a book under the title To Wake Up Russia, and she is now writing a biography of Boris Nemtsov. Second speaker is Mikhail Fishman. He's also a journalist, and he works at TV Rain, Telekanal Dozhd, Russia's only independent and oppositional TV channel, which mostly broadcasts through internet. Before joining Dozhd, he has worked at several medias, Russian Newsweek, Forbes, the Moscow Times, the Kommersant. In 2017, Mikhail Fishman and Vera Krychevskaya released a documentary about Boris Nemtsov that you, we hope, have had a chance to watch. The title of the movie, A Man Who Was Too Free, and this is a documentary dedicated to Boris Nemtsov. He's also writing a book about Nemtsov now, and we invited Mikhail and Zhanna to speak about the legacy of Nemtsov as a politician, as a public figure, as a man, and explain maybe the Nemtsov phenomenon, and most importantly, how Boris Nemtsov changed Russia and changed Russian politics. So, Mikhail, would you like to start?
Yes. Well, first, thank you very much for having us, me and Zhanna, today at this very special event. It's a big honor, big pleasure for me personally to be part of it. As I've been told, I assume at least someone has watched the film. It would be really helpful if it's the case. Yet I start with a few words about the film and about Nemtsov's legacy and what Nemtsov as a public figure means for me, for us, for Russia's political life today. Well, to make long story short, the story of the film is quite complicated. I was approached because I am a political journalist by background. I started writing about I was mainly a writing journalist. And started writing about reporting about Russian political life in 1999. It was then when I first met Nemtsov, as he was very open to journalists. So I, of course, knew him personally. And it's from this perspective is a personal matter too for me. But again, he was very open to basically everyone. He was the most open political leader for journalists across Russian political spectrum. So yes, the story, the history of the film is basically unimportant. What's important is that we finally made it happen. It first started as a German television project, and I was approached to write a script for it, but I started doing interviews as well for this television film, but I didn't like the outcome because I didn't have my hand on the wheel, and then we reinvented the film. We restarted doing it. We found money, financial sponsors in Russia. And we found, I also found Vera Krichevskaya as a director, because I'm not a filmmaker. I'm more of a journalist, and that's how we ended up with the film that you actually that we all now have, and we made it by December 2016. And the basic idea for the film was following from. Because, well, of course, from the very start, it was something very obvious that we all owed Nemtsov a memory. We were struck by his murder, by us, by we, I mean every caring individual in Russia and even across the globe. It's for those of you out there, it's easy to understand how the impact of what happened on February 27, 2015. It's like you all totally remember where you've been, where the 9/11 attack had caught you. It's because it's imprinted in your memories forever. And that's the same thing with Nemtsov, and it was this understanding that our lives will never be the same, and from the very moment we learned about his murder, we understood that it's not only Nemtsov who had been killed, but something much more significant, the idea of Russia's freedom. And actually, this was the basic approach for the film that we finally made. The idea that Boris Nemtsov, his path, his career, and Russia's path are inseparable. That Nemtsov represents Russia's quest for freedom and democracy better than any other Russian political leader, and I will explain why. He's a totally unique character in Russia's history. He emerged as a public figure, as a political activist, as a public activist. He started his career in 1988, when the very same time when Russia was finally abandoning this cruel and violent dream, 70 years long dream of building communism and this era of Soviet rule, the very time when actually Russia started seeing freedom, feeling freedom and understanding what it was. And that's when Nemtsov emerged in Russia's public life. And his career and his life ended 3 years after Vladimir Putin came back to power as Russia's president in March 2012, thus marking the end of the idea of alteration of power, the idea of checks and balances that was still there from 1991 until he got back to 2012. So that was Russia was going back to this era of Soviet rulers who always left the Kremlin their feet first, and that was the case. And his death happened 1 year after the annexation of Crimea, the global turning point, again representing in practice this imperial mentality of actually representing it on the global map, the imperial mentality of Soviet Russia. And what's absolutely important to understand that his death, his murder, is deeply connected to both these these turning points. historical events: Putin's return as president, and the war with Ukraine. So this was basically the idea of the film, and this is the idea of the book that will be finished and will appear this fall in Russian and then in English, because it's already contracted to be translated in English. So I hope there will be an opportunity to read it as well. The same idea, but much more detailed look at every historical turning point that Nemtsov went through. And so the idea is that the story of Nemtsov is the story of Russia, and they are inseparable, and on very, very many levels. He took part in basically every significant political event which shaped Russia's future and Russia's politics in the 90s and even after that. Would it be the coup of August 91, or would it be the events of October 93, when Yeltsin opened fire at Russia's Supreme Council, which was the form of Russian parliament at that time, and he remains the only person, the only political individual in Russia's history who was so close to be at the top, who was seen as next Russia's president, not only by Yeltsin, but by a vast majority of Russians, who was probably the most popular political figure on Russian political landscape in the mid-90s. His rating was probably the highest at this point, and again, who was seen as Russia's next president, and who ended up in very short time, in few years, in 10 years, in 11, whatever, in few years, ended up being harassed, persecuted, arrested on daily basis by the same state, which virtually almost saw him as a very high-ranked official, and that's something that never happened with anyone, and I doubt will ever be the case. And what's also important, that he remains the only political individual who was very active and present in the 90s, whose political biography was shaped in the 90s, but who remained active and influential public figure and political leader in 2010s, in 2000 and 2010s until his death. And he is the only Russian political leader we know that was available to achieve that. Let's play this fragment when he was first, when Yeltsin first speaks about him as his possible, probable successor.
И потом вдруг мне орут, что либо сейчас, либо никогда. 2,5 года назад вы сказали про Немцова, что вы в него верите, несмотря на то, что он очень молодой губернатор. Эта вера окрепла. Тут он сказал, да, пора ему в президенты метить.
Он настолько вырос, что его уже можно и в президенты метить. Я даже помню это место. Это был теннисный корт Сарика Пушкина в Нижнем Новгороде. Он впервые вроде как в шутку сказал, ну, слава богу, я спокоен, можно ходить на пенсию. Вот, слава богу, есть молодой парень, нижегородский губернатор, он будет моим преемником.
Папа ему симпатизировал больше, чем другим. Не знаю почему. Может быть, потому что что-то у них было такое, знаете, общее. Они были в чем-то похожи даже, наверное, внешне оба такие высокие, статные. И, может быть, потому что еще, кстати, у папы не было сына. И у него вот что-то он видел в нем как такую родную душу, что ли. У них были общие цели, общие задачи. В общем, они были единомышленниками.
And in this is summer 1994 when Nemtsov is already emerged as an extremely popular political leader in Russia. And if we move fast forward very quickly to let's say 2013, and we take a look at how Navalny speaks about Nemtsov. This is very significant because for Navalny, who just emerged as the most popular opposition leader of Russian opposition during the events of 2011, the street protests in Moscow and across the country, for him it's impossible. It's very hard to imagine that Nemtsov, who bears this guilt of the 90s, who represents the 90s, which are viewed by across Russia now as time of misery, and this view is shaped, of course, by propaganda, again on a daily basis. That he would be able to achieve anything because he's out of fashion, he's out of date, he's obsolete, he can't achieve anything. And yet he can. And let's take a look at how Navalny speaks about it.
Вы проголосуете за РПР Парнас, то я буду жить в Ярославле и работать в Ярославской областной думе.
О том, что он хочет участвовать в выборах в Ярославле, мне рассказал об этом сам Немцов. Там очень тяжелая сложилась ситуация в городе. И мы долго, конечно, совещались, долго спорили и решили поучаствовать в этой кампании.
И я смеялся над его кампанией в Ярославле. Ты и со своей приватизацией, белыми штанами, и со своей московской физиономией, и с газетами про то, что у тебя 15 жен, и историями про тебя по телевизору, ты никогда в глубинке ничего не сделаешь. Он этого добился, и это, конечно, произвело на всех большое впечатление.
После того, как Немцов выиграл выборы, он купил в Ярославле квартиру, он очень активно работал в областном...
To explain what happens in this fragment, it's 2013, and Nemtsov just won a seat in local parliament of Yaroslavl region, which is less than 200 miles away from Moscow. Yet it was very hard to believe that he would be able to achieve that, and that's when he actually reinvented himself as a street political leader from the ground, and that's where his exclusiveness comes from. And what I also wanted to add that he, as he was able to reinvent himself as a political leader in a totally new political environment, in a hostile Putin's Russia, which was Yeltsin's Russia turned upside down on every level, and it also is important to understand that Nemtsov is a believer, that there are not so many names in Russia's political history which can, to them, which is when it's true about them, and what's important that he remained loyal to what he believed till the very end, and he's a liberal whose worldview and whose views on Russia and Russia's future take roots back to, again, late 80s and early 90s, when Russia made its first step to become part of the global world, global civilized world. And as we are looking at Nemtsov from where we are now, and when it comes to when we see what's going on in Russia, and when it comes to Russia's search for freedom, Nemtsov now more than even before, but always is a guiding light. He's a measure. You can always take a look at Nemtsov and where he stands and what his views at Russia are, and take a look at where Russia is, what's going on, and you will see how far Russia is from where it should be. To make long story short, and how his ideas are welcome and appreciated, you can judge how far Russia is from this path of freedom, which is started almost 30 years ago.
Thank you, Mikhail, for this wonderful introduction. Before we pass it to Zhanna, I wanted to remind the audience that you can now already send questions through the Q&A. There is a function Q&A. You can write the questions, and then after that, we'll read the question to the panelists. Zhanna, please.
Thank you, Ekaterina. I'm happy to be here today. Thank you, Mikhail, for your introductory remarks. Well, Ekaterina, just to make it clear, I'm not a politician. I live in Germany. Sometimes I travel to Russia, but I'm not engaged in politics right now in any way. That is important. And for Mikhail, it is important to mention that yes, I have just finished my book. It's not my father's biography by all means. I basically left it for Mikhail to explore it in depth. It's more of a personal book. So the title is My Father's Daughter. I hope it will be published in Russia in late August, I believe. Well, so Ekaterina, you sent me some questions, and just I want to elaborate on them. You asked me why my father has become a symbol of resistance and a uniting political figure. So first of all, I believe that to a large extent, my father has become a symbol of resistance in Russia because of his tragic death. So this murder was such shocking news for so many people, and that made them learn more about my father's political biography, his career, and more importantly, his news. And I do agree with what Mikhail has just said, that the assassination of my father was the turning point in Russian politics, along with the annexation of Crimea. And I think that it would have been impossible hadn't Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. When we talk about my father's role in Russian politics right now, I have to say that apart from his death, of course, an incredible amount of respect and admiration for him has a lot to do with his personality, and Mikhail has recalled lots of things, but I just want to sum things up. So till now, people watch my father's interviews. Why? Because he is a political visionary. And I know very few political leaders around the world who have an ability to make long-term predictions. Actually, I don't know anyone, probably you know. And just to give you an example, it's a very popular social video right now on Facebook. I think it was watched like millions of times. It happened in 2008. My father took part in the conference in Italy, and he was asked about Russia in 10 years or something like that. So, and he answered that Putin's policies will definitely lead to international isolation and sanctions. Well, in 2008, my father sounded really unrealistic. So nobody could have imagined it in 2008. But in 2014, Russia faced broad economic sanctions and international isolation. And of course, right now, Russia is struggling with the effects of this isolation. Regarding his ability to bring people together, the important fact is that at some point of time, my father decided to leave his ambition aside and to help others. It was a very important and wise decision, but it was a very hard decision from him. But he believed that this common goal to fight authoritarian regime in Russia was much more important than internal conflicts. And of course, that is very important for his political legacy. Also, there are few politicians from the 90s who were so active as opposition politicians later after Putin came into power. So my father was one of the few of them. And what he had and what was unique about him is that he had extensive experience in state governance. So he worked as a legislator, both in the higher chamber of the Russian parliament in the 90s, and he also was a legislator in the early 2000s. That's one thing. And he worked in the executive branch of power. He started his political career as the governor of the province of Nizhny Novgorod in the early 90s, and then he held a position in the Russian government. So he knew perfectly well how the system of power functions in Russia. And that is very, very important. And why he made a choice to join the opposition while others preferred to stay loyal, to have some advantages being in the system of power, remaining in the system of power, just not to say anything critical about Putin. I think that the answer is very simple. It's because of his character and because of his strong convictions. So he, as Mikhail said, he was a believer. So he had very strong convictions and he did not change them. And these two things, his character, he was a very passionate person, and his convictions made him step into politics as the leader of the most powerful voice critical of Putin, Vladimir Putin. So, and I do agree with Alexei Navalny that my father managed to reinvent himself as a politician and to adjust to changing political and social environment. And important, he was not arrogant. So it was okay for him to distribute his anti-corruption reports and campaign leaflets in the streets in Moscow and many other cities. It was okay for him to go to the metro and to distribute leaflets before the upcoming anti-war march that was scheduled for the 1st of March in 2015. And it was okay for him to participate in the local elections for a person that used to be the first deputy prime minister of the Russian government. I think it's important for every politician not to be arrogant, to start from the very beginning. And finally, my father was a very caring person. He cared about people. He took part in one-man protests in support for political prisoners. And it didn't matter for him whether this person who was in jail, yes, at some point of time, shared his political beliefs or not. He just wanted to support these people. And he was very responsive. Everybody could write him on Facebook and he would answer this person and he would offer his help. I think that many people still remember my father as a very responsive person. He had never turned a blind eye on people's problems. So just to sum up, I have recently talked to a researcher. I think that Mikhail knows her. Her name is Alexandra Arkhipova. She is studying the Russian protest movement. And she said to me, your father has become an indisputable moral authority right now for many, many people. And even the Russian state propaganda is helpless. No one can do anything about that. That is a fact. And I think that it's because of those things that I have just spoken about. So that were my remarks about my father's political legacy.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I thought I would lead off the discussion here with my colleague and talk. I have one political question and I have one kind of artistic question about this film. And again, we're encouraging everybody to send in their comments and thoughts and questions on chat or on the Q&A. I guess the political question is one that for Americans is completely unclear, and perhaps for Russians too, that the film makes very clear that for some time, Nemtsov was the protege of Yeltsin, or possible protege of Yeltsin. And then there is a conflict, I think, between the two of them with regard to the prosecution of the war in Chechnya, and Putin appears. And he appears right in the middle of the film, like 60 minutes in. And 90 minutes in is Maidan. And so there's this structure, this arc to the film. But I guess the question is, the one thing I don't think is explored, or maybe cannot be explored, is, or thought about or talked about in the film, is where Putin comes from. Is it he was some sort of guarantee for Yeltsin that Yeltsin would not be prosecuted for the Chechnya war? But basically this question is, where does this person come from? Boris, Nemtsov is clearly part of the apparatus, he's part of the government at this period in time, but where is this person of mystery? Where did he arise from? That's my first question.
Well, yes, of course, we couldn't explore deeply, go deep into how Putin appeared on Russian scene and became Yeltsin's successor, because it would be you will find it in the book. but it's important to understand that the events of 97, 98 shaped to a big extent what would happen next. First, the war between within the Russian elite, within the Russian apparatus, within the Russian, within the Kremlin, and the government. This fight that Nemtsov was part of, the fight between the government and the oligarchs. And as it is stated, I think in the film they both lost. There was no one came up as a winner. And the next step was the default of August 98, the financial crisis, which basically left the whole nation totally disillusioned about the path they were going through for the whole last decade, and which actually shaped this perception of the 90s as the age of misery. And this was very unlucky, but this happened. And as the result of these internal fights of the 97 and the financial crisis of 98, the public mood changed, and the mood in the Kremlin changed. And the Kremlin found the Yeltsin and his inner circle found themselves trapped, and now they were fighting for their survival. And their bet was Putin. Finally, the bet that the bet that they could sell, they felt they could sell to the nation. Still, it was quite a miracle what happened in with his election. Yet that what they calculated would be their best bet to first to get security for themselves, and second, as an option, to continue the way Russia was going. And it's also important to understand that we now, when we talk about these events, we look from now, when we know a lot about Putin, about who he is, about what political regime he started building. And if you would look from 98 and early 99, even 2000, even 2001, you would get a different picture, even of Putin. And Nemtsov supported Putin. He didn't vote for him, and but Putin's government basically took and got further with the reforms that were started by Nemtsov and Chubai's government in '97, and that was also very important. Who knew back then, in '99, how things would turn out? No one among those who actually chose Putin as Russia's leader thought, I guess, my wild guess would be that that things would turn this way. They didn't, but what's important, they were first thinking about their security, and that was their major interest in this very hard fight about who would rule Russia.
Thanks very much. I have one more question, and then I'll pass it to Katya and to our audience. And it's an artistic question, and then there's also one about the organization of the film, and you can choose one. I was interested in the guitar music that's used in the film because it reminded me of sort of an old Soviet film, this sort of strangely interesting chords and slightly out of tune guitar playing. That's the music for this film, the documentary. But I guess the structural issue has to do with the decision to end and give such prominence to Khodorkovsky in the film. I was interested in what was the thinking besides deciding to have the last word in the film be his.
Well, both. The film has its inner structure and its own energy, you know, in a way, and it felt right to end it with this Khodorkovsky's quote, because Khodorkovsky also went through a lot. He spent 10 years in jail as a political prisoner, and he we filmed him. That was 3 years after he was released from jail, which was also perceived as a miracle, because when he was in jail, we all thought it would be forever. He would virtually die there. And well, again, there are those who agree with what he said, those who disagree with those he said, but it's a strong statement.
Yeah. Great, thank you. I'll pass it over to Katya.
Thank you. So we are getting questions. The questions are trickling, but I also wanted to insert my question, probably addressed to both of you and Zhanna, first of all. So in the film, there is this clear message that 1997, 1998 was the turning point. And especially since you played this fragment with Yeltsin, considering Nemtsov as a successor, there is this feeling of bitterness, of missed opportunity. historians usually try to avoid these questions. What if Nemtsov had not opposed the privatization of Svyazhinvest, for instance, or what if he decided to abstain from the battle of oligarchs? What would have happened? And I was thinking whether, Zhanna, maybe you can tell us whether he expressed it in public or maybe in conversation with you in the family, some regrets, like understanding that he missed this chance to really hold power and maybe save Russia from what happened later. Whether he shared these regrets, these ideas, and maybe some words about, I shouldn't have done it. What do you think? Was there this?
Had he decided not to be involved into this bitter battle against Russia's oligarchs, he would have been a different person. No, I've just said he is a person of strong convictions, and he had never ever regretted anything he had done, being the first deputy prime minister of the Russian government. Or so I had never heard him complaining about missed opportunities, because he was a very optimistic person. I know that it's a widely discussed matter that my father would have probably become Russia's next president, but I think that it would have been very hardly probable, and my father understood that his chances were not really high, and he understood it rather quickly. And it wasn't his ultimate goal, because he could have chosen another path. So there were two options for him in the 90s. So he was elected as governor of the province of Nizhny Novgorod in a landslide. It was a landslide election for him, and he could have decided to work as governor of the province of Nizhny Novgorod, and from this point he could run for president. And for me, this seems to be a better decision. But I think that he had a lot of, he was a rational person, but he had a lot of feelings. And I think that was in Mikhail's documentary, when Tatiana arrived to Nizhny Novgorod and she met my father and she started to cry. And her argument for him to join the Russian government was that, so once my father helped you, now you have to help my father. And it was them. Yes, Tatiana said that. So, and he found for him impossible to let Yeltsin down, because he was very grateful, because Yeltsin actually appointed him governor of the province of Nizhny Novgorod in 1991. So, and well, I see, so I had never heard him saying anything about missed opportunities. So it's very strange for a person to think all the time about him missing any opportunities. You cannot move forward if you think about your past.
Beautifully said. Mikhail, maybe again, this, because I read some comments on YouTube related to your film, and everybody was saying, oh, he would have been such a great president. So, and then apparently this was the message that you wanted to deliver, or was maybe misread by the audience. He would have been a great president.
Oh, well, this was not our goal to send this this message, but he appears as a leader of a big scale. He totally does, and it's been pointed out already by those who knew him, better than I did. I mean personally about his character. That when he was young and when he was at the height of his popularity and when he was really close to enter the Kremlin, he was probably not prepared. He was not that wise at that time, probably not that wide, I don't know, strong as a political leader. But when he was actually very far from it, when he was in terms of Russian official hierarchy very low down, he would make a great president probably, because he went through amazing and very fruitful career and learned a lot and gained strength, gained political strength. Though it appeared that he lost it because he was wiped out of every official structure, would it be legislative branch or executive, as Zhanna said. Yet at the same time, he was gaining, he kept gaining his political strength. That's also what I actually learned from working on it.
Thank you.
We have several questions, so I thought we would start now with our audience, and we can come back to questions that I or Katya have. But the first question, I suppose, is for both Zhanna and Mikhail. It's from Brendan White, and it concerns opposition leaders or representatives or figures who associated with the opposition, like Boris Nemtsov and Navalny currently, that in Western media and American media, there tends to be a oversimplification, misunderstanding of the nature of the opposition in Russia. And so the question is, what are the greatest misrepresentations or misunderstandings of Boris Nemtsov outside of Russia in terms of his career and his achievement?
Thank you for this question. I have already read it. If I may start.
Yes.
Well, I do agree that there is this oversimplification. It's because there is no enough interest in Russia in the United States of America. So people are focused on their domestic problems, and they had a lot of them. So Russia is a distant country somewhere in Eurasia, and few people speak Russian, few people are interested in Russia, they know about Putin. Of course, there was this interest in connection with the meddling into the American election. But there is not enough interest, and that's why you have to simplify things to explain to bigger audiences some things. And I do agree about an overwhelming misrepresentation for Alexei Navalny in the Western media. And of course, I think Russian state media outlets and some state-sponsored actors have a lot to do with that. I think that they basically support this campaign or sponsor this campaign against Alexei Navalny. So he is presented as a nationalist. And there was one very important article of Masha Gessen. She's a regular contributor to The New Yorker. If you want to read about Navalny's alleged nationalism, you have to read this, not an article, but a column of Masha Gessen. So regarding my father, I think that there was no any misrepresentation that I came across. So probably simplification, yes, but misrepresentation, no. Inside Russia, of course, because inside Russia, so there is one film of Mikhail Fishman and there is another film by Zosia Radkevich, but there are so many documentaries broadcasted by NTV, our state-sponsored television channels, and they all of these documentaries are focused on my father's private life. So I think there was no single article in the US about my father's private life. That's what I think. I know probably Misha knows better than me.
No, I can't add much actually. It's hard for me to judge how, because I'm not part of this landscape. Well, of course, I read the New York Times, or I read this Masha Gessen's article as well. But I don't really follow that deeply. I'd say that with every new day, the picture of Russia is in Western media, in global media, is with every new day is closer to reality. Not because the media work better, but the reality in Russia becomes much more simple, and that's the case. It's easy. It's really not much to. There is no room for debate. What's right? What's wrong? So it's really hard to make an error judging what's going on in Russia. So it's you could yeah, I remember these debates in early 2000s about the second war in Chechnya, about who Putin himself, about where Russia is going, when it was not really clear. But now it's also clear. I don't even know. I haven't come across Navalny's portrait as a pure nationalist. Well, of course, he has some background, but it's important to understand how he also sort of reinvented himself after starting as a Russian nationalist, and what he meant by that actually at that time. So, also important. But again, I don't really know how close the American media and others really explore these matters.
If I can comment on that, what I think also we can consider as oversimplification is the image of Russia in the 90s. And what your film does, and this is very important, is it really changes this image, because also there is another project by our Father Avin and Andrei Lashak, the internet, and the project in the book about Berezovsky. And what comes from this project is an image of, this is such a story of betrayal, of violence, of fight, of politics mixed with their oligarchy, and there is no hope. And this is like you kind of keep thinking that there is no hope for the state, for the country. And your film gives a different story of people who did not betray, like Nemtsov. He didn't betray anyone, who kept firm their convictions, and who were really thinking not about their benefits or their advantages or their wealth, but about Russia and the ideal. So it's kind of reinvigorates the hope in the reforms. So the completely opposite picture of the reforms. And I think that this is very important, because it really moves away from this narrative of banditry state. And Nemtsov is not alone. Clearly, we have other figures there, and Yashin, who speaks in the movie, and then Navalny, and these are people with noble intentions. And I think this is a great thing that your documentary does. We have another question, which is more maybe philosophical, not exactly about Boris Nemtsov, from Jonathan Wigging. About the phrase that you, Mikhail, and Zhanna also used, the turning point in Russian politics. And the question is, in what destination? So if you can reflect on this, in what are the changes, or in how Russia's path sort of changed in 1991, 1993, maybe 1998. If you can summarize it very briefly, I know it's a very hard task, but how would you, in a few phrases, maybe describe this turning point? And maybe where Russia is heading now?
Me or Mikhail?
Anyone?
All right, I like this phrase, the turning point. It's my favorite. Well, I believe in turning points. Well, I think that there were a number of them during Vladimir Putin's presidency. So 20 years ago, Russia was a different country. Of course, we could understand that Putin would like to step away from democracy, but he was not that resolute. So we didn't see enough resolution, and he cared about the West and about his relationships with the West a lot. So he didn't want to have a bad image in the West. One of the turning points, because there were many important turning points for domestic politics and for international politics, for foreign affairs. If we talk about foreign affairs, the important point was his speech at the Munich Security Conference in 2007. And he stated that Russia should play a more important role on the world arena. So, and he complained about Americans' dominance around the world, and he said that in his opinion it was not fair, and he wanted Russia to play a more crucial role. So that was one thing. Another thing, of course, the annexation of Crimea. So at this point, I think there were a number of reasons why he decided to do so. First of all, that helped him improve his image and his perception inside Russia. His rate of approval skyrocketed in 2014. That was one thing. Another reason, so he actually was not afraid of Western reaction. At this point, he started not to care about grave concerns or even about sanctions. And of course, my father it was the first high-profile murder in the modern history of Russia. My father did not really believe that he could, that the Russian state could murder him. He did not believe. And that, of course, led to even to massive repressions in Russia. And now we are in a situation, so Russia is not a hybrid authoritarian regime or something like that. It's almost a dictatorship. And only in the last quarter of 2020, the Russian Duma adopted so many new laws. It's even not really safe to be to participate in this discussion with Princeton University for Mikhail, for example, because we have a new law on foreign agents. So any individual can be labeled a foreign agent if he or she has any contacts with foreign-based, I don't know, any institutions. I mean, yes, and so. We did not live in a dictatorship 20 years ago. The regime has been evolving, and now we are very close to a dictatorship.
Thanks, and actually that's a good bridge to a question from Dasha Koltunyuk with regard to an article that you wrote in 2015. Zhanna. And the article, the quotation is, Putin's Russia has not brought a revival of spiritual values. As state-controlled TV tries to convince us, it has caused Russia's moral decay. And as long as Russians approach every problem through the filter of whether it will affect them personally, this country can move in only one direction, and that is backward. And so the question is there a sense that the attitude or moral decay is changing? Is there a sense that the attitude of caring only about oneself, things that affect one personally, is that changing in relationship to recent protests?
Thank you for the question. I read my article, I think a couple of months ago. I do agree with myself. Well, I think that yes. So it's not unique to Russia. People want to lead normal life. There are very few people who are passionate, who have strong convictions, who want to put at risk their lives, their careers, their families, their freedom, and all these things. We have only one life. And my father perfectly understood that. And that's why, and of course, you have to make some choices in your life. You cannot, in a dictatorship, one cannot avoid to make political choices in many ways. So just a recent example of what I'm saying. So there gonna be a book fair in St. Petersburg. And you know that Kira Yarmash, who is Alexei Navalny's press person, she is now under home arrest. She wrote an excellent book about her experience in jail. And this book, there should be a presentation of this book at the library fair in St. Petersburg, and they canceled this presentation for political reasons. That is what moral decay means. So all people who took this decision, who supported this decision, they have moral problems. We can understand them, etc., but that's what's going on. That's one thing. So to be optimistic. So there are other people who do not want to betray their ideals, their views. And a lot of those people took to the streets in Russia in support for Alexei Navalny during these massive rallies. I took part in these rallies as well. So, and the core group is those people who are under 35. So these are very young people between the age of 18 and 25. So they are feelers, they are very active, and they do not want to put up with the situation. They want change. And of course, because they are relatively young, they have nothing to lose. So they don't have families, they don't have any formal employment. So there are some risks to be expelled from universities, of course. So there are people like that. So it's not the majority, of course, but yes. And we see this gap between younger people in Russia and older people in Russia. And this gap is widening. And also this unresponsiveness of the government to the demands of young people, of people who do not agree with the policies, that creates a big problem for their government, for Putin's government. I hope I have answered your question.
So let me also insert my question, which is perfectly well connected to this problem of morality and maybe moral choices. And I wanted to ask Mikhail, since you interviewed Nemtsov's friends, and I could see from the interviews sometimes this, the motive of mea culpa, like people are like asking for forgiveness virtually, right? Because They betrayed him in certain points. They maybe didn't support him enough. They made choices which were beneficial for themselves, but not for him personally. Didn't support the sense of betrayal. So I was wondering, first of all, like one factual question and another is more essential and moral. Factual, what was the attitude of Yeltsin to Nemtsov after his resignation, Nemtsov resignation, forced resignation, 98? Did he perceive it as betrayal, Nemtsov, and whether Yeltsin sort of continued maintaining relationship with him? And maybe in general, so it looks like Nemtsov didn't really, he had a tendency of forgiving people. Maybe Zhanna, you can also respond to that, whether he ever spoke about betrayal, about this, the friends who didn't support him at these difficult situations. So about Yeltsin after 98 and about the friendships.
Well, 98, you mean August, September 98, when Nemtsov declined the offer to enter the new government. After the financial crisis, after default, the government collapsed. The Prime Minister Sergei Kirienko, who was brought to Moscow by Nemtsov and who was Nemtsov's aide, let's put it this way, first in Nizhny Novgorod and then in Russia's government, then became prime minister. But this government in which Nemtsov was, which existed for a few months, and in which Nemtsov was his Kirienko's right hand and deputy prime minister, it collapsed. When Yeltsin invited Nemtsov to Moscow, he actually declared between them that he will not be. He gives him a guarantee that he will not be fired in 2 years. So Nemtsov could stay, and that was Yeltsin's message to Nemtsov, that still he is invited to join the new government, the government which was something very new politically for Russia, because it was the government that Yeltsin had to agree with existence, but not it was not Evgeny Primakov, who became the prime minister, was not his first choice, was not even his second choice, but he had to make peace with parliament, to make peace with Duma, to agree to a compromise. That was the idea of this government. And Nemtsov thought that it would make really no sense to stay in the government. His access to Yeltsin was already devaluated. He had no real in this new government. He would not be able to act really. And when I was in Yeltsin's museum, in Yeltsin's archives center late last year, I guess, I found Nemtsov's letter to Yeltsin when Nemtsov left the government, and I can translate it for you if you wish. It's very short. Dear Boris Nikolaevich, you did so much for me. I will never forget that. It's a pity, of course, that we we were not able to meet in person, but probably it's ahead, our meeting, he means. So my wish for you is that your strikes would always reach their targets, period. Boris Nemtsov. So no, they didn't meet after. Yeltsin was not in his best shape. Yeltsin had other things to care about, other problems he had to care about. Of course, it was not denial. Yeltsin was not betraying, Nemtsov was not betraying Yeltsin at this moment, probably vice versa. that could be the question, but of course not from Nemtsov's perspective. And they would meet next, I guess, only after Yeltsin would step down as Russia's president. They would never meet again with Yeltsin still being in the Kremlin. Did I answer? I think I answered your question, but it was, yeah, but okay.
Thank you.
I wanted to go back to the film a little bit, and I was wondering that Medvedev doesn't have a role in this particular story, and whether or not there was any relationship whatsoever between Boris Nemtsov and Medvedev when, during that brief period in time, he was a kind of puppet president. And I guess the related question to that is whether or not, because Nemtsov seems to have been extremely popular both in Yaroslavl as well as Nizhny Novgorod, how the political situation in those two cities, which are smaller, compares to the situation in Moscow. Because the general perception, I think, outside of Russia is that, you know, Moscow and Russia are one and the same thing politically. And I wonder whether or not Boris Nemtsov actually felt that in terms of reforms, economic development, possibilities, freedom, that actually life in smaller cities had more possibilities than Moscow as the center. So those are two questions for either of you.
So the first question is
first question concerns Medvedev,
why we don't have that that much of Medvedev in the film.
So whether or not he has any role in the, is he a part of the story of Boris Nemtsov at all?
Well, not really. No, we virtually skipped his 4 years as Russia's president, and that and again, when you make a 2 hours film about more than 25 years of Russia's history, that makes sense after you know what happened in 2012. And there were questions about turning points. Virtually more than 3 years I'm trying to figure out what these turning points are, and what is a turning point when we talk about Russia and Russia's history, and is the next turning point is it inevitable after the last turning point, before that turning point, and when the first turning point actually happened? But 2012 was a turning point in terms that this is a move that you can't take back. And when we're talking about, and yes, Russia's path was shaped by developments in the 90s to a big extent, of course, but this the history is a very strange and complicated matter, complicated subject when social movements and economics cross their paths with wills and consciousness of particular individuals, and they make their decisions, and that was what was happening. And Crimea was destined probably to happen after Putin came back to power, but it was in his hands not to get back to the Kremlin in 2012. He was able to make this decision for himself, and he didn't. So this is more of a of a real turning point when we're talking about turning points, though there were so many of them. So that's why when we're talking about Medvedev and Medvedev's era, it's very interesting phenomenon, because for me as a journalist from inside Russia, that even political journalists, that time, that era was full of hope in a way, that we really hoped that, well, again, we have reset with the United States and with the West. Russia was starting again negotiations with NATO. Really, it was happening. Russia was almost got visa-free status with Europe in 2011. Russia was, I don't know, it was about innovations, modernization. That was, we understood that it was, yes, that it's more complicated than that, but still we were full of this, of these hopes. But on the ground, where Nemtsov actually was, the picture was really very different. And this is when he actually started to be persecuted and harassed on a daily basis by Kremlin-guided youth, directly from the Kremlin. This is when the manipulations and falsifications of Russian election got really to a new scale. This is when the whole idea of non-system opposition, the opposition which is not allowed to take part in political life, really emerged. Well, basically it was shaped again before under Putin's second term. Yet it all was developing under Medvedev as well. So that's really that's that. But we of course there were reporters who cared much and who fought and who covered these events on the streets. Yet at the same time, there was this hope that we actually had this light ahead of us, and we didn't take the things that seriously as we should probably have taken them.
Well, thank you. I guess we'll take a final question. This is very conveniently, Zhanna, about your fund. Elizabeth Bergman is asking, I'm wondering if we could learn more about Zhanna's Journalism Foundation, how people might participate.
Thank you. Actually, my foundation is not a journalism foundation. I just wanted to refer to Simon's question, and I will put a jump to the question about the foundation. Well, Simon, I spent some time in Nizhny Novgorod early in January. The situation in Nizhny Novgorod is as bad as in Russia. But the city, I mean, people in Nizhny Novgorod were very active, and like thousands of people took to the streets on the 23rd of January and on the 30th of January. But the local political leadership is awful, incompetent, of course, totally loyal to Putin. And security forces in Nizhny Novgorod are known for their brutality and violence and rudeness. I just directly faced it. So we have the so-called department that fights extremism. Extremism is a strange thing in Russia. It means all people who have different opinions about politics and other important things for the Russian state. So, and actually these people, they filmed everybody during those protests. And one woman approached my mother, and she wished her to die. So that's the situation in Nizhny Novgorod. And we have some awful criminal cases against some activists in Nizhny Novgorod. Well, so coming to your question about the foundation, so it's actually called the Boris Nemtsov Foundation for Freedom. But we're going to have two events that have a lot to do with journalism. First of all, we'll be hosting a webinar on investigative journalism in Russia in cooperation with the Euro Parliament on the 29th of March. I can share the link with you, Ekaterina, and Carol and Simon, and you can send it. So you can join this conference. And I think top investigative journalists are about to join, including Roman Badanin, and Krista Groziev is not a Russian investigative journalist, but he's well known in Russia. He is, all right, he is. He's going to join. And Maria Pevchik, she's a well-known woman right now in Russia. She is the head of the investigative department of the Anti-Corruption Foundation led by Alexei Navalny. So please join. I will send you a link so you can share it. Finally, we've been running the Summer School of Journalism and Cultural Studies in Prague. I doubt that we can host it this year in Prague. Probably we can have an online course, or we can find a different country to host the school. So it's a 3-week Russian language program on journalism and on some other things not directly related to journalism. I have already sent a link to Ekaterina. If you are a young researcher and you are majoring in Slavic studies, you're interested in journalism in Russia, and you want to find out more about Russia and its people, please apply for the school. So there are 2 obligatory requirements. You have to be a fluent Russian language speaker, and you have to fill out an application form and also to submit a concept of your media project. But you can find more on our website. Well, so we have a lot of other programs. We have public events, for example, the Boris Nemtsov Prize for Courage. This year's prize recipient is Alexei Navalny. We organize the annual Boris Nemtsov Forum. We have a program to support political refugees, a fellowship program. So, and now I'm building, it might sound a bit ambitious, but I'm building a think tank on Russia to develop policies to deal with most pressing issues Russia face. It's an oversized security sector. It's, of course, impunity of officials who are involved in various crimes, and digital sovereignty. Of course, I understand that we cannot implement these policies right now to fix the problems, but we have at least to think about it and to debate them, because the debate in Russia, and Mikhail knows that perfectly well, is centered on fraudulent elections. And there is no any serious debate about policies, policy-making issues, and how to actually fix the problems, because I believe that many people in Russia think that these problems have no solution. But they have.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it seems that you're speaking about the United States when you just said the obsession is fraudulent elections, and there's no serious policy discussions. It's like, wait.
Okay, probably yes, probably you don't have. So I don't know, but we don't have any serious policy discussions. So I think that's important. You can argue with me, of course, but I'm creating a think tank on the basis of the Boris Nemtsov Center for the Study of Russia. That's a joint project with the Charles University, based in the Czech Republic. So I would be happy to discuss it in detail with you, Simon, and with you, Katerina, and with anybody who would like to join us.
Do you accept donations?
Of course I do. So I do not personally, but the foundation, yes, I can send a link. I will send you a link. We'll be happy to receive donations. Thank you. So we are a small organization. We are still a startup. It's very difficult to fundraise. Don't want to elaborate on that. I think that's not the topic of our today's discussion.
Excellent. And if I'm not mistaken, you use the prize that you received personally to fund this organization.
Absolutely. I was very fortunate to receive the Solidarity Prize of Poland. And I was the last recipient of this prize, because Poland elected a new president and they closed the program. Yeah, the Solidarity Prize, it had a monetary value. So, and I received over, just to be precise, 237,000 euros, and I donated the whole sum to the foundation, and I didn't pay any taxes in Germany. So I was very fortunate and helped me build the foundation, and thanks to Poland.
Okay, thank you. So we have many comments in the Q&A in chat. Thanking you, Mikhail and Zhanna, for your courage being here and informing all of us about our current event, but also speaking about the film. So we're very, very grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Wonderful event. Thank you very much.
Take care.
this event has been recorded, and if somebody wants to come back and listen again, it will be available. The link will be available on the website of Princeton Russian East European and Eurasian Studies Center. Thank you again.
Thank you. Have a
Bye-bye.
nice day.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.